This is me before the Germans wiped us out. This is me when we once had a life. And he starts screaming. And Rabbi Shlomo said he was screaming and crying so strongly, so loud, that I was afraid that he would have a heart attack or he would fall down because he was an old man with a cane. So I hugged him and I held him while he was screaming for fear of what would happen to him. And while I'm hugging and holding this man, I finally understood the whole story. You don't get the story sometimes until you go through the whole thing. Where was the mother and daughter the whole time? 8 o'clock. Where were they? They set me up. And as he's screaming and crying, he tells me how they wiped out his whole family. He says, but me. He says a bullet was valuable to the Germans. They didn't have enough weapons, enough bullets to kill everybody. So me, they beat me up with the part of their gun, the handle of the gun. They cracked my head open a few times. And that's why I look the way I look. And he's crying and screaming. So Rabbi Shlomo says, my dear friend, what was done to you, it wasn't right. You nobody. Rabbi Shlomo said, my dear friend, who was the beautiful little girl and her mother that I met last night at the concert? I don't know, where are they? Do they live here? And he says, that little girl, that woman, that little girl is my daughter, and that's my wife. She had compassion on me because of my whole life, and she married me, and that's all that I have in this world. Rabbi Shlomo says, I looked at this man, and I understood the whole story. They wanted me to have the opportunity to spend time with him. And I realized at that moment, I was probably the first person that was able to hear his story. And all he wanted was to tell his story, that someone should feel his pain. And I sat with him, and I cried. I stood with him, and I cried with him for 45 minutes. And after 45 minutes, I said to the man, I don't understand why you're crying. He says, I just told you. What do you mean you don't understand? Rabbi Shlomo says, you have more than anybody in this world. He says, what are you talking about? Everything was taken from me. He says, yeah. Your daughter that I met last night is the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in this world. There is nobody more beautiful than this little girl. How blessed you are. I don't know anybody that has more in this world. He looked at me, Rabbi Shlomo said, he says, I've never thought about that. Rabbi Shlomo says, think about it. You have more than anybody in the world. You have the most beautiful daughter, the most wonderful wife in the whole world. He looks at me and says, you know, the biscuit after, you're right. I stayed a little longer. I missed the plane. He and I spent time together another hour or two. And about 12 o'clock or so, or 11 o'clock, there's a knock on the door, and the beautiful little girl and the mother come into the house. And he and I, the father, are sitting there, hugging each other. And I said to him, what a wonderful husband and father you have. The most beautiful person in the whole world. And we spent some time together, and I walked away. And as I walked away, one thought came to my mind. This is the sweetest man I ever met in the whole world. The most bitter man in the world, who is really the sweetest man in the world. If only someone